What is up, y'all? So, I am here with a kind of impromptu My Thoughts video. I've been playing this game, Warhammer Inquisitor Martyr, uh, for quite a while. Um, I do most of my gaming for this one off stream because it's kind of like a guilty pleasure game for me. I have streamed it a couple times though, but 99% of the gameplay or the time playing this game was off stream. Either way, I still wanted to do a video uh, going over my thoughts for this game. Um, and let me just kind of spoil things right now. It's good. But going on. So I do want to preface this that I haven't completely like 100% the game, but I've gotten to a point where I don't feel that I'm gonna give it much more attention. I've rolled the credits on the expansion. I've done the DLC. I've gone through all of it. So even though I'm not max level, I have pretty much seen all there is to see. Experimented with the systems here and there. So I have an idea of everything that would happen in the future if I was to stick with this game and max everything out. Um, I did try another class, though, as you can tell, I didn't play it for very long. Mostly because I was under the impression that it was a different storyline. Um, as far as I know, it's not. It's just the same story with a different class, i.e., different character. So there is a lot of variety in that when you do different classes and characters. They do have different voice actors, different dialogue, but ultimately it is the same path forward. Um, this is the main character I played, and ironically, I named him Guts in preparation to use him primarily sword and shield and big old eviscerator sword. And I kind of steered away from that entirely. I ended up leaning really hard into the flamer build, and it worked. And as you can tell here, I definitely spent a lot of time on this character. So, overall, the so with Warhammer, uh, in general, one of my personal favorite things about it is that it's a incredibly just mind-numbingly huge uh story universe. It covers thousands upon that, well, actually, honestly, millions of years. Though as a fan and an enjoyer of the content, games, well, I don't want to say movies, but the games, the shows, the books, all that kind of stuff do typically fall within a finite period of time. But there is a lot of history predating a lot of the time that most of these stories take place in. The other thing about it being so large is that the medium itself, or I should say the property itself, is an excellent medium for fanfic to actually technically be considered canon lore. Not necessarily, but uh, for the tabletop game especially, a lot of people always like to think that these fights really did happen, because of how much time goes by, how vast and how large these factions and stuff are, covering, the entire galaxy. There's just quite literally limitless potential for things to happen, stories to be told, battles to be fought. So, um, with that kind of setup in place, it's always really, really fun when you're exploring things, stories, and stuff, to kind of see where the connections are, because it's not necessarily like a series of TV shows or movies where at the beginning story starts and at the end the story ends. I can play one game that may take place before, during, and after another game's events. I might play a game or watch a show that took place thousands of years before another game or show I did. Or I played, watched, whatever. So there's just a lot of kind of immersion in that you are able to experience stories from the games and stuff like that and truly feel like you yourself and your adventures are part of the canon lore. Like, you affected the outcome of the Lord of the Rings. It's honestly on par with being that in depth. That aside, little tangent, apologize. I do that a lot in these videos, but I don't script things. I kind of just go off the cuff, and I like to do stuff like that because even though I do a lot of ums and ahs, a lot of gaps, a lot of struggling to find the words, I feel like these are probably the most organic way, or this is the most organic way to do these kind of videos, and really gives you an honest look at how I feel about these things, my honest thoughts. So with that out of the way, how does this story come together for me? And albeit I didn't find a lot of attachments and things, some characters were kind of cool. There were some personalities that stuck out. Although for me personally, the coolest things with the characters and the story are seeing some of the big names, excuse me, being brought forth to tell the story. Right now, I'll let you know there will be spoilers. So if you don't want to know the spoilers, well, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe skip ahead a few minutes. Because once I get past the story, there really won't be a lot of story spoiler stuff to discuss, mostly just gameplay and game structure. But as is right now, we are going over the story, so there will be story spoilers. But the ultimate bad guy with the DLC and everything happens to be Fabius Bile. And if you know anything about him, he's crazy. It's hard to say that he's evil, but let's say he has no compassion or empathy for mankind. He really doesn't give a fuck about anybody. And he also has a bunch of clones of himself. I don't even know how many. I don't think that there actually is a numerical amount given. It's just that he has many clones, all of which are essentially psychically linked to him, the original one, and that was probably the perfect character to put in a game like this because you do fight and defeat him, but it's only his clone, so he is still a character in the universe, in the overarching lore, and there's a lot of other little bits and bobs going along with that. But it was just really cool to see something from the greater Warhammer lore being injected directly into this game that I spent a lot of time myself playing. Other than that, the story kind of just follows the Inquisitor, whatever character you decide to play, whatever class, going through the motions of finding a derelict spaceship, a gigantic one, and essentially purging it of all the demons and everything that have decided to take up residence there. And then going even deeper, finding what experiments have been going on there, what the mission's purpose was, and all of those things. And playing through the story, you find a lot more detail in that I'm not necessarily going to cover because it's not all that important. However, I will say that your enjoyment in those details, in those missions, will kind of come almost entirely from your enjoyment or interest in the property as a whole. A lot of times you'll come across, okay, for instance, here's another one. There is a character, if you will, who has essentially a secret protocol mission that is revolving around preparing for a Hive Fleet invasion. Hive Fleet is Tyranids, and typically they're all over the place, but they have hive fleets, which are large congregations. Arguably the largest and most formidable attack forces that faction has would be the hive fleets, and they're what come in and eat worlds and all these kinds of things. And the missions in this game that take place kind of discussing that really boil down to nothing more than going through the level, killing the few Tyranids that there are, and moving on with your day. I would love it if this game gets more support down the line, because it did just have an expansion roughly a year ago. I think it was mostly just content, like a new character class, abilities, stuff like that. Um, Not necessarily a lot of story content, but it would be really, really awesome if there was another expansion focused on the Tyranid High Fleet invasion that was hinted at in those series of quests. Excuse me, got the hiccups. But anyways, overall, story wasn't as engaging and gripping as a lot of people, especially hardcore critics of video games, would probably want and desire. Um, it really kind of boils down to being a fan of Warhammer in general. If you're a fan of the Warhammer lore and logic and universe, then you'll probably be really into the story and appreciate a lot of little nods and mentions that happen throughout, while also enjoying the Diablo-esque gameplay. But past that, there are some characters, but they're hard to find endearing. They're mostly just plot points and devices to help you push the narrative forward, and as well as set up the outlying gameplay. For instance, this is a command bridge here. This is your home base, if you will, and this pretty much has the entirety of all the characters you meet. There are a few that aren't here that do pop up, but for the most part, the regular occurring characters that'll have any relevance in the story at all are all right here. I will give them some props that in the story, it's not they just suddenly appear here. The story does go through the acts and the motions of acquiring some of these people. So, for instance, this lovely lad over here was a prisoner and pretty much failed his mission. And if you know anything about the Warhammer lore, you know that Space Marines and anybody in the Imperium that fails their mission usually doesn't come back at all. However, things happen and conspire to have him be indebted to me, therefore being part of the crew. And similar things have, our stories pretty much come together with all of these other characters. One of the few exceptions is Ragna over here. She happens to be the captain of the ship that I'm on, and therefore she's with you from the start. Admittedly, I found her very lacking in personality. She did have a couple of quips here and there, but they didn't serve an endearing purpose, more just narrative progression. Either way, I didn't find any of them bland or boring. I just didn't find any of them like, holy crap, you're my favorite character, best boy, best girl type thing. That might come off a little confusing. It's just that they did enough to feel important, but they didn't do enough to feel like they stand out. Like they themselves are part of the story. Rather, they're just well done narrative devices. That aside, the story really doesn't matter for this game because the entire focus of this game is the Diablo-esque gameplay. You go into missions, you just clear them out. You can actually alter the missions in varying degrees of difficulty. There's random ones that pop up, timed ones. Just honestly, there's so many different kinds of missions. There's a variety of them where you just kill everything, you hunt down a specific boss monster, or you have to go find an item, take a base, all sorts of things like that. There might be a guard unit or something like that that's needing of extraction, so you go in there and take out all the bad guys, help them fight off a few waves, and then you guys are all good to go, that kind of thing. And whereas it might get repetitive doing mission after mission, it does add some variety to that repetitiveness, because ultimately the gameplay function boils down to go to the command bridge, select the mission, go do the mission, come back to the command bridge, rinse, repeat. But as any good Diablo fans know, it's all about that loot. So every time you go in, you're going to just get tons and tons of gear, different sets of armor, different weapons, different accessories, equipment pieces, all these kinds of things. And you can tweak them to your heart's content, because even though things have tons and tons of stats, this is a number cruncher's fantasy. Because you even have the ability over here, talking to one of your crew, that lets you go through. You can make the gear, you can modify it, which I should have had an example for you, but essentially you can put gear in here. We'll just craft something so I can show you. Let's get ourselves a cool ass plasma cannon. Yeah, that sounds good. You know what? Even better, we'll go with a architect, the rarest rarity multi-melta. So now we have this multi-melta. I can actually individually change the skills and stats that rolled with it, as well as the individual numerical values of said stats. And I can also increase the level of the weapon. Say this level, it's level 70, but I progress to level 90. I can make this a level 90 weapon, and the stats will reflect it. You can even go as far as to extending how many enchantments that it does have in certain cases. And then there's shards and stuff, which if this weapon had it, I could then add more enchants to it. A good example of that would actually end up being my armor, because holy shit, I have 6 slots on that bitch. So if you love building builds, different archetypes, different play styles, this game caters to that amazingly. This is actually probably the most intense number cruncher stat accumulator type of game that I have ever played personally. You have your passive skill trees, which are things that you technically only have the ability to unlock by doing them. So you can see here with my suppression tree, my execution tree, the bars aren't full, which means I don't actually have access to these skills until I do enough of whatever the requirements are for these. For instance, I need to complete heroic deed, stalwart servant. So 15 side quests. And I've only done 10 side quests this entire time, apparently. And then all of these have, different passive effects. And then you also have your attributes, which are essentially more passive stat boosts. And then on top of that, every weapon that you get has a different variety of abilities. And in some instances, though I never played this style, you can, if you have 2 weapons that go together, you will get additional abilities, or some abilities will change. And for instance, there's pistols that you can get in the game that fire lasers, and if you're dual wielding them, you have the ability to fire a large continuous laser until they overheat. It's really, really cool, really, really in depth. The replayability on this is quite literally limitless. You can play the same class, same weapon style, and you'll probably still end up having a different build if you wanted to. I could still use the flamer if I wanted to, but I could turn around and make it an entirely different focus for the build, because right now I pretty much am just leaning heavily on my heat damage. However, I could lean more into crit damage and critical damage effects. So instead of relying so much on the initial damage from the weapon, because it's a flamer and it's a continued or a channeled ability, every time the weapon does damage, there's a chance for crit. If that crit happens, I get XYZ effect. So many different things that you can do. I could sit here and talk about that aspect for hours, and I won't, because we do need to wrap this up. I've already gone almost 20 minutes on this as it is. But the depth to the variety of gameplay, honestly, is endless. It is a bottomless hole of different varieties of playstyles, weapon choices, ability choices. The missions are endless. The styles of missions do have variety. One that I missed, or one kind of mission that I failed to mention earlier, though I don't know if there's side quests or extra missions that follow this. However, some story missions allow you to take control of I think it's called a Warhammer Titan. Like, obviously the universe is called Warhammer, but specifically there's things in this Warhammer universe called Titans. Every race essentially has them, although the Imperium of Man are usually the only ones that use the actual title Titan, and then every other faction has their versions of Titans. And in the rules, Forge World, the battle, like the tabletop game, they all fall under the Titan category. Either way, giant fucking robot with giant fucking weapons. That's what it is. And you get to control one of those and go through the mission and kill everything. And it's just honestly a lot of fun. A little bit clunky on the controls, but still a lot of fun and a good way to kind of break up that gameplay loop again. Like I said, the gameplay loop, even though it always boils down to you zone into the mission, kill everything that's there, and you leave. Whether there's an objective to get, whether there's a place to hold, a person to find, it all kind of boils down to killing stuff till you get to that objective, and then you're out. But that's the whole point of the game. You get to kill hordes and hordes of enemies. There's a variety of them. There's Chaos, Imperial Guard defectors, Eldar, Dark Eldar, Tyranids, all sorts of things. And being a massive Warhammer fan that I am, I just couldn't get enough. I would love to see some Tau in there, some, like I said earlier, the Hive Fleet expansion would be really cool. Maybe a focus on the Sisters of Battle, which they did just add that being a playable class. However, seeing the Sisters as a faction, maybe some defect or sisters that are rogue or whatever, you can kill them. I don't care. The point is, there was plenty of variety, but with Warhammer, there's always potential for more, and I would love to see that. And I feel like this game is a really good base to expand upon. And with all of the gameplay variety that's already in the game, just adding more content to go through, honestly, couldn't hurt at all. It would only make it better. But on top of there just being your standard go here, do that kind of mission, you also have things like the Void Crusade, which basically are an entire campaign or series of missions that you can do to varying degrees of success. You can do one mission. It's kind of like a spider web of things. Matter of fact, you know what? I will just show you for completion's sake. So, starting here, I can essentially just go through one path, get to the Supreme mission, complete it, and be done. Don't have to do everything. Or I could do everything and go through and get even more rewards. And essentially what this is a loot campaign. What you want to do is complete all the missions. Once you've completed however many missions that you feel is adequate, you complete the final mission, and then you get all the loot from all of it. And at the end, there's like a nice big loot chest room. It's great. And of course, the more missions you do, the more rewards you're gonna get. And this is the mission structure does kind of fall under the same mission structure that you can go to normally, but there is some small variance here. One of the things that I found really fun were the tarot cards, whatever you want to say. I don't even have all of them because you have to grind in certain star systems to unlock these. I didn't grind in this game at all. I pretty much exclusively stuck to the storyline and veered off a little bit here and there. But these provide all sorts of bonuses, penalties and bonuses that will enhance the amount of rewards that you get at the end of the mission. And it can be anything from having, multiple enemies spawn to having, damage periodically taken throughout the entire mission, all sorts of stuff. And it actually does add a lot to the variety of the gameplay that I was mentioning earlier. And with that said, you you've got your traditional storage box with all the things that you don't want to use or lose right away. You've got co-op games, so you can do stuff with other like people. You can go through missions and kill things with your buddy. There's PvP. I've never done a single round of PvP, so I have no idea what that could possibly be like, honestly. Um, might as well give it a shot after I'm done filming this. But I, for me personally, my enjoyment out of this game had nothing to do with player versus player. I I haven't done a single one. I had no desire to, still have no desire to. It wasn't anything that genuinely intrigued me, but I appreciate that it's there. If ever I got a hair up my ass and was like, you know what, I do want to try PvP. I want to kick somebody's ass in this game. It's there. I put almost 100 hours into this game entirely solo, and I wouldn't have had it any other way, honestly. I do feel like maybe if I had a friend, some co-op missions would be really fun. That's probably the multiplayer aspect I would lean into. But none of my friends are big Warhammer fans. So, I'm pretty much the only person that I know that would play this game. With that being said, let's kind of wrap things up here because I did pretty much cover everything that this game has. The biggest thing for me personally is, did I enjoy it? Yes. It wasn't until I want to say, I think it was 2020, possibly 2021, I played a game called The Ascent. And that game is the entire reason that I even bothered to pick this up, that I even bothered to play Diablo 4. And honestly, it's the only reason I've ever gotten into like the isometric point of view games at all. Because for me personally, I really didn't like that perspective. I felt it was just kind of like a little bit immersion breaking, and it just felt too artificial for me. But then I played The Ascent. My opinion changed entirely. I saw the magic there. I saw the potential. I started feeling, I'm like, okay, so maybe I was completely wrong about this genre. There was no maybe. I absolutely was wrong. And I'm happily wrong. And I'm glad I can admit that, because now that I've admitted it, I've actually experienced some of the best games I've ever played. The Ascent being one of them. But this isn't about, or this video is not about that. It's about Warhammer Inquisitor. And that game is right along with it. Being a huge Warhammer fan, I was really intrigued by a lot of the set pieces. The design, like, holy crap. First of all, this is just the command bridge. You can see out the window, which is funny to me that they have, giant cathedral style windows on a fucking spaceship of all things. You can see out the window and you can see part of the rest of the spaceship. You go around here, there's freaking skulls and on everything. There's symbology from the Warhammer universe everywhere you look. There's just detail upon details. You zoom in, you can see the individual rivets. Like, there's just so much there. Like, and then this floor, this little walkway, caught my attention a long time ago. Just lined with skulls for no fucking reason, really, other than it being symbolic of the universe itself. You've got these little guys with, like, I can't zoom in any more than that, but he's got like a metal attachment on his back. The wings are metal, but this is essentially an infant. What the fuck was that, cat? My cat is overcome with amazement at how detailed this is. But the actual missions themselves also emulate the same level of detail. There's just tons of debris all over the maps. Cranking the graphics and performance all the way up, persistent bodies, they start to pile up. There's just, in some missions, hundreds of corpses just littering all over the place, and very, very 40k. You've got a social aspect to it too. There's like a whole, they do events and everything. I honestly never ever messed with any of the social stuff because, again, I don't have anybody that I know personally that does that kind of a thing. But there's like, what is it, like weekly events, monthly events. It kind of like functions almost like a free-to-play game with how many extracurricular events that they run, whether it be doing like side missions, special boss missions. You get different blessings and different enchants and stuff from these events. So much stuff. They did not skip on content. If anything, this game might be the most content filled game that I have ever played. It's honestly a little overwhelming, and partly the reason why I'm doing this my thoughts video now instead of sitting there and grinding out to level 100, doing all the extra side stuff, because it just would never end. Even if I hit level 100, okay, I hit that milestone, but there's still going to be endless missions because they keep popping up. There's no, I can do one mission and another mission's going to pop up. There's no clearing a sector. There's no, wiping the board of missions. It's just there's always something else to do. And so, whereas I appreciate that, and I think that's a great quality, and more games need to do that, honestly, it is a little overwhelming. And so, leading me back to the point I was making, that's why I'm doing my video now, because I feel that I've completed it to my heart's content. I've done the story, I've dabbled with the side content and the extra content. I know what the game is offering me, and if I ever feel the need, I know that there's hundreds of hours of content here just waiting to be played. As it is, I've already put around 100 hours into it already. So it's a big game. It's a really big game. And I can see how some people would count that fact against it. But personally, with the way some games come out nowadays, especially these big budget AAA titles like Final Fantasy 16, they just kind of do the bare minimum and put it out at full price. I bought this game on sale. Admittedly, it was a Black Friday sale. It's like a bundled deal with a bunch of Warhammer games, including their DLC. I think it was around an $80 bundle. So roughly the price of a new game. One new game. And I got like 5 games plus all their DLC. And this one alone more than made up for that. But there's other games that I got that are also really good in that same bundle. All of which are Warhammer. And at one point, we will discuss them on the channel. But let's wrap things up here and kind of put a big old number on it. See what I think. I mention this every time. Part of the tradition with these videos, I like to do 2 scores. One is my personal score, and then one is what I like to consider the more objective, generic score that everybody would kind of agree upon. Whether it be a gamer that plays once a year or a person that plays all day, every day, and doesn't know what outside is. So we'll start with my score. For me personally, this is a 10 out of 10 game. I could not have enjoyed it anymore, I think, other than it just simply having more content. The gameplay loop I found addictive, the loot grind, the stats, the number crunching, the variety of ways to obtain said loot, the lore and the Warhammer mythos that's here, all of those things just give it to me. I loved it. And then on top of that, performance-wise, I think I only ever had like a couple hiccups, and those hiccups were really just being respawned in the wrong spot. As a matter of fact, just tonight, right before I rolled the credits, the boss fight I had, the first time I attempted it, I had died, and it respawned me outside the room, and I couldn't get back in, so I had to restart the entire mission. But that's like the only bug I have ever experienced in my 100+ hours in this game. And that is saying something, because a lot of games nowadays, there's something wrong. There's a weird mishmash of, bad AI, there's bugs, there's clipping, there's all sorts of weird issues like that. I didn't experience any of that with this game. Not a single time. The most I can say is maybe a slight amount of pop-in in the background textures, but as far as like the foreground, the place I was actually at with my character killing the enemies and stuff, never had an issue. It ran beautifully, and I just wish I could say that about more games nowadays, but here we are in 2023, almost 2024. Oh my god. And they're still putting out full price games that run like shit. And it's really refreshing to be able to dive into a game like this that is so full of content that cater to my personal tastes um, as well as indulging me in a genre that I otherwise would never have gotten into. It it hit every button that I wanted to. It scratched every itch. It was just a lot of fun. It's a guilty pleasure, to be honest. You know, I would play this after stream sometimes, or if I wasn't feeling so good and I couldn't stream, which as of late has happened quite often. I just haven't been able to sit down long enough to do a full stream. I would just get a mission or two out of the way, because why not, right? And sometimes I would hop on with the intention of just doing one mission and then getting off, and I would be on for hours. That's kind of what happened tonight. I didn't even think about filming this video, but I rolled the credits and I'm like, you know what? This is a game I want people to know about, and I want people to know how much I loved it, which was a lot. So for me, 10 out of 10. I love the game. My only critique is simply that I wish there was more like factions. It doesn't even necessarily need to be longer. Maybe if they would have uh, cut out some of the missions and replaced them with missions dealing with other factions, or if they had side quests that were a little bit easier. That's something I can say that was hard for me, is differentiating the missions. Some of them I could tell were, just one-off missions. Some were seasonal missions. But for me, it was kind of hard to tell, like, okay, what is the side story here? What is being told? What am I actually doing off the beaten path? That was a little hard to differentiate, but that kind of falls on me. The information is there. I just need to look a little bit harder. And as somebody that wasn't too interested in doing all that stuff, I'm not going to get too critical on how it was presented, because that was my choice not to go down that route. I kind of just said, like I said, focused on the story. So realistically, I just wish that there would have been maybe like a hive fleet campaign, maybe some appearance from the Tau, which is probably, it's really close to my favorite faction in the Warhammer universe. Um, some orcs. Honestly, this is like the only Warhammer game I think I've ever played that didn't have orcs. But there was like chaos demons and all sorts of stuff. So it's not that it was lacking. It's just knowing Warhammer and the greater lore, I would have loved to see more. And that's really all that was. So for me, 10 out of 10. And any huge Warhammer fans out there, probably going to be 10 out of 10 for you too, especially if you like the Diablo gameplay loop. It's there in spades. It's done amazingly. For the average player, now this is the one, it's a little bit harder for me to do because I try to take my personal bias out of it, and that's almost impossible no matter how you look at it. But I feel like this would probably be like an 8.5 out of 10. And I'm doing that because most people that are going to play this game kind of will already know what they're getting into gameplay wise. And with that, like I said before, the way it takes the Diablo formula and emphasizes that, I don't see how it could possibly be done better. It is exactly what you want. There's tons and tons of content, and you just go wild with it. If you have no idea what you're getting into, it's a blind playthrough, maybe it won't be as appealing. It's hard to say, because most people that would pick this game up that don't game heavily would at least probably know what kind of game it is when they pick it up. Because the people that don't game very heavily, those, one game a year Andes, they usually know all about that one game, or at least enough about it to enjoy it. Like Call of Duty or FIFA, they like that soccer loop. They like the first person shooter loop. In this case, they like that Diablo kill stuff and get loot loop. So the reason I would bring it down from a 10 is simply because of what I mentioned earlier with the story. it was a little convoluted and a little hard to follow, especially sometimes in some of the missions you're having conversations while also fighting, and so you've got the sound effects from the fight and the chaos going on while also someone is talking. Now, admittedly, the dialogue does have subtitles so you can read, but it's like, okay, am I really going to try to read what's up in this top corner when I'm fighting somebody like here in the center of the screen? Maybe not. And if you don't really know a lot about the Warhammer like lore and mythos, you're probably just gonna, a lot of it's gonna go over your head, and you're just gonna be like, wow, these guys are assholes. Like, what the fuck? Like, am I the good guy or am I a bad guy? Like, what's going on here? And so that's probably gonna push some people away. Excuse me. And the story delivery, very few, very few like characters and like personalities to attach to. There are some. I'm not going to say it's completely devoid of any actual characters, because clearly there are some. But there is a lack of standout characters. So there might be two or three people that come to mind when you think of the characters in the story. But when you get down to the nitty gritty of like, okay, what did I like about them? It's kind of hard to elaborate. You might say, okay, this guy had a couple good quips. Maybe I like this guy's attitude, how he wanted to kill everything. Whatever. None of the characters had a lot of time to shine. And that's okay, because like I said, for me with the story, they were there mostly as a narrative device to move the story forward and to make certain things make sense. And with the person that's not super heavy into gaming, they're probably going to at least want to enjoy the story from this game. They will still be able to, but they probably won't enjoy it as much as, like I said, I did, because I'm just a huge fan of the lore. I've got the bias behind it. I know what I'm looking for, what I'm listening for. They're going in blind, and a lot of things are going to go over their head, and it's just not going to land the way it did with me. But that really is probably the only thing that would bring the score down. And I would say maybe it's just how overwhelming things are. It does a good job at tiptoeing you into things. Like I said, a lot of these people don't start off here. You have to do missions in order to progress the story to make it so they are here. And each time you get a new person, there is a varied tutorial that kind of teaches you the rundown basics of what they do, what their function is. But past that, they really are kind of one note people. Like I said here, I can't have conversations with any of these people. They're literally just here to provide the service that they're meant for. And this is a cool feature here. This is essentially your oh shit button, if you will. While in combat, you can customize every aspect of this, and it doesn't even necessarily have to revolve around healing you. It can be a buff, temporary buff. It could be a cleanse. It can be a heal. It could be a heal over time. It could be just a variety of different things. And I found that to be really cool. And there's just, like I said, there's so many stats and so many numbers and so many different like abilities and so many different synergies that it could be just a bit too overwhelming for the more casual gamer. Even if you're a Diablo fan, it still might be a bit overwhelming. So it's kind of hard to say how, positively or negatively that would affect the score overall. But when I'm looking at it objectively, because that's more of a personal opinion of things, when I'm looking at it objectively, it's got the quality, it's got the content, it's got the variety, it's got the amount of things. It just kind of falls down on the person to find them and sit there and run the numbers. And okay, I want AoE damage bonuses. I want physical damage bonus. I want suppression damage reductions. I want warp resistance. I want this. I want that. All of those things are there, and it's probably done the best way possible. At least out of the games I've played from this kind of genre, I can't think of one that's done it better. I honestly think this out Diablo's Diablo, if that makes any sense. But this video has already gone on way too long, and it's all in a one take, believe it or not. So for me, it's a 10 out of 10. For the average person, the average gamer, the more casual, not really hardcore into things, I'm gonna give it an 8.5, because with it being a little overwhelming, with the story being a little convoluted and honestly a little hard to follow, it does affect the score a little bit. But 8.5 is still a great score, and if you're slightly interested in Warhammer, or you just think space or dudes in big old armor and space aliens and demons and stuff are cool, I think you're gonna like the game a lot. I would 100% recommend this game to anybody. I would even recommend this game to people that don't play these kinds of games as the introductory for it. So if you were to never played a Diablo game in your life, check this out. It just might be what gets you into the genre. And if you have played Diablo games before, you need to check this out, because holy crap, it does the Diablo things so well. And like I said, there's just so much there. It's just, it would never end. Partly why I had to do the video now instead of continuing forward, because I don't know when that endpoint would ever come. And not only that, this is just one character. There are multiple different classes to choose from, multiple different characters, and they, like I said, just did an expansion about 11 months ago, around a year, introducing a Sister of Battle as a new character class, and her character class actually changes some of the gameplay flow, not necessarily the gameplay itself, but some of the flow quite drastically. With the abilities and stuff that she gets, there's new relics and new items specifically just for that class. I put 100 hours into this one, and I have never seen a single one of the artifacts that that class could ever use, which is good, because that means anything that drops you can use for that character. You don't have to worry about, oh, I got this really good battle standard, but this character can't equip those. Never have to worry about that. That's only ever going to drop for the characters that can use it. So awesome, awesome details, limitless content, great Warhammer video game. It goes through so much of the mythos, so if you're in it for the Warhammer title, you're definitely not going to be disappointed. And like I said, there's a character in this game that is Fabius Bile. He's quite prolific throughout the entire Warhammer 40k story as it is. But there's a couple other people that pop in and out that I think you might appreciate as well. So thank you guys for sticking through this long video of me just rambling about Warhammer and Diablo. If you have any interest in this game, definitely pick it up. At least wishlist it on Steam, so that way you can grab it on sale when it comes out, because it gets cheap. And even at full price, it is still worth the money. I would willingly pay full price for this game today, even though I've beaten it already. That's how good it is, because I know that it's something I need in my collection, and that one day, probably if one day I ever got that itch, I know that this game would deliver in spades. I would be able to jump in, run some missions, have some fun, get some loot, grind some levels, and just kill a bunch of damn Xenos. But that's it. Appreciate you guys. If you ever want to see me play these games live, I've got a Twitch channel. Everything should be linked in my channel description. If not, it's Guy in a Panda Suit on twitch.com. And I stream pretty regularly. As of right now, my stream schedule is a bit mixed up, because life outside of content creation is changing for me. But once I get a more handle on things and can get myself into the rhythm again, we'll be pushing out a more steady stream of content. But yeah, what are you doing? Go check this game out.